As we enter conference championship weekend, the college football committee has pretty much kind of shown their hand as to which direction they are leaning on what teams may sneak in to the first ever 12-team college football playoff. And Burr, is it getting cold because winter meetings are taking place right now in the MLB as the largest possible free agent signing looms ahead? I'm your host, Matthew Reardon, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I remember it like it was just last week where we were previewing this upcoming college football season. Here we are now going into conference championship weekend, which is really going to shape how this college football playoff bracket is going to be. And boy, has this season really flown by. I know I'm impressed with how my team's doing. So is Ed. And believe it or not, David is too, based off expectations. But I want to introduce my co-host here today. We do got David Street.
What up, everybody?
And we've got Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
Yeah, just like I said, mine and Ed's team currently right now are in the top 12 as they are the number one and number two teams respectively in the college football playoff rankings, as we will be taking place in this weekend's conference championships. Oregon facing off against Penn State, Texas in a rematch against Georgia. Things are exciting there. And yes, just so I could include David, things are exciting in Gainesville too, as they have gotten some early signing commits. It's such a weird time right now to even have that signing period, but it's working out in all three of our teams' favor, so I can't really knock it too much. But yeah, let's go over really quick some of the top teams in this bracket that came out this last week. I'll go over the rankings and then we'll kind of talk about the bracket a little bit. But 1, 2, and 3, we got Oregon, Texas, and Penn State. 4, 5, and 6, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State. Ohio State, after losing that Michigan game, they dropped to 6. That sure will be a talking point. 7, 8, and 9, we got Tennessee, SMU, Indiana. 10, 11, and 12, Boise State, Alabama, Miami. But this is where things get interesting because Miami's knocked out of the ACC championship game. So their fate is almost all but sealed, but there is a way for them to possibly get in. But right now, the bracket looks at 8 and 9, Ohio State versus Tennessee, Penn State at the 5 seed versus number 12, Arizona State. We got 7, Georgia at number 10, Indiana, and Notre Dame at the 6 with Alabama at the 11th. The 4 teams that get the bye is Ohio State, Boise State. Sorry, I said Ohio, Oregon, Boise State, Texas, and SMU. It's weird seeing Boise State in there, David. It's just they are a good program, but it's just so weird. Here they are right now slated to get that first round bye, and then SMU too. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for Boise State, yeah, but think about it. When's the last time Boise State even had a bad season?
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, it's always been tough for them. I mean, the odds have always been stacked against them being a group of 5 school.
Yeah.
But here they are now making a name for themselves in this first 12-team format. They've taken full advantage of it, and I respect them for it. I mean, they got a beast at running back.
And certainly SMU is more surprising simply because they were in the group of 5 last year, and I don't think you expected them to make that transition so smoothly. But kudos to Rhett Lashley and company. They've done a phenomenal job their first year in the ACC.
Well, one thing that I want to point out, Ed, I'm sure you've noticed it, but I'll say it here. 3 out of those 4 teams with the buys are in their first year in their new conference. I mean, that is really impressive. Oregon in the Big Ten, Texas in the SEC, and SMU in the ACC. What a way to start out your first year, right, Ed?
What kills me about what you just said is it's actually all four Power Four conferences that have a new member that is in the championship game and currently slated to be the representative of that conference in the bracket.
Yeah.
That is beyond the wildest dreams of conference realignment, just bar none.
Meanwhile, all the teams in those conferences are like that Arthur meme with their fist all balled up because this was our conference and you came in here and you just ruined it. But hey, if you don't want them to be at the top, you got to beat them.
Well, and you know what I think this also shows, because I remember there was a big debate not too long ago about how you were good or bad depending on what conference you played in. Like I remember people talk about how, oh well, this team is in the SEC, so they should beat you, or this team is in the Big Ten or the ACC, so we shouldn't take them seriously. The fact that we have four teams in the first year of their respective conferences in their title games, I think just goes to show at the end of the day, if you can play ball, you can play ball. And the conference you're in doesn't really determine how good or bad you are as a team. Like I remember those years when Clemson and Alabama would meet up in the title game. Clemson didn't play exactly the toughest schedules, right? But that didn't matter at the end of the day because they still matched up well with Alabama. As I said, doesn't matter what conference you're in. If you can play ball, you can play ball.
Absolutely. And if you noticed, I said Miami at 12, but I did not mention them in the bracket because the 15th seed team right now, the Arizona State Sun Devils, would leapfrog them as them being the conference champion. I have to say that because they have yet to win the conference. Actually, none of these teams have as of right now. But Arizona State would leapfrog Miami. They would be out. And the biggest controversy that we are hearing is Alabama is in. This is Alabama team that put up 3 points against Oklahoma. Okay, I know Oklahoma's a big brand school, but they are not a good team right now. So let's let it begin. Let's talk about this controversy. Ed, why is Alabama there?
Uh, if we're being honest, it's very much like the episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where they're interviewing Mr. Crab, and it's the same answer: money.
It is
It's
perfect.
it is totally the brand that just gives all the money to the TV show, if you will, of the college football playoff. So that is the big reason why I say it is. We don't know what the committee is actually saying behind closed doors because we don't really know what their inputs are for the different dynamics of what they are deciding out of. So that's all we have to go off is our speculation. And the speculation is it's brand bias because Alabama has been there for so long and they bring so many eyeballs, good and bad, because you hate to love them and you love to hate them, and that's really the Alabama fan base in a nutshell.
Well, Ed, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody on the committee even watches college football. Every time Ward Manuel opens up his mouth, I just want to tell him to shut the hell up because that dude has no idea what he's talking about.
Well,
Alabama, go ahead.
no, actually, no. You go ahead, David.
Alabama even being considered is a freaking joke. All right, like I'm sorry, you cannot lose to an average Vanderbilt team. You cannot lose to an average Oklahoma team and get coddled like this. All right, and Alabama didn't just lose to either of these schools. Okay, the Vanderbilt game was a one possession game, but Vanderbilt controlled that game from start to finish. They completely destroyed them in time of possession. And Oklahoma, who by the way was 1-5 in SEC play, entering that game, completely destroyed them. It was a lot worse than the 24-3 score even indicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And some will argue that Miami deserves to be in over them. Some will even argue South Carolina does. And yes, I know South Carolina lost to Alabama in a head-to-head play, which that's a topic that is brought up because of that. But nonetheless, the teams that are behind them aren't in a conference championship, so they have no way to leapfrog them. Alabama is just sitting idle. They're sitting clean, and I mean they have a pretty clear path to it.
Yeah, and well, first thing I want to say is kudos to Oklahoma for owning the state of Alabama because their two wins in conference this year were Auburn and Alabama.
So you're proud of little brother, basically.
Aw, he's your dream.
Yeah.
So, but the point is still valid. South Carolina, if you wanted to be part of this discussion, beat Alabama. Simple as that. It was head to head. Where it gets murky is the Ole Miss argument because of different factors of strength of schedule and analytics and what are people actually looking at besides what the payroll sheet looks like from the revenue sheet looks like. So that's where it gets a little murky. But in the end, I don't think a 3-loss team deserves to be in the playoff. I don't care if it's a lesser schedule. Miami needs to be in there over Alabama because guess what? They didn't lose a third time. It's just simple as that. Alabama's losses, you talked about Vandy, you talked about Oklahoma. Those are bad enough. Miami didn't play as tough a schedule. I will admit that. But you know what? They won all but 2. They only had 2 losses, not 3. So that has to count for something in this.
So I understand the head-to-head argument, but at the same time, there has to come a point when the quality of your loss matters. Because if you lose to opponents that are that bad, Vanderbilt and Oklahoma are not that bad, obviously. They're still going to go bowling, right? But per Alabama standards, if your losses are that bad, okay, that has to matter. And as for Miami, I would have more sympathy for them if they didn't blow a 21-point lead to Syracuse, all right? Losing to Georgia Tech was bad enough, but at least with Georgia Tech, you can say, well, Georgia Tech was expected to win that game as the game was going on. I'm not saying they were expected to win before the game, but as the game was going on, it was like, okay, Georgia Tech's going to win again. But when you blow a 21-point lead against Syracuse, man, as good of a season Syracuse had, there's no excuse. I don't have any sympathy for you at all.
So, if I want to ask this to you guys, if Clemson beats SMU, do they get in?
I think SMU deserves to be in over Alabama, period.
But what about Clemson?
Well, if Clemson wins, they get the bye, so they're automatically in.
Yeah, sorry. Well, no, because Arizona. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking Arizona State. What happens with them in Iowa State? Because it depends on the rankings at that point.
Yeah, so this whole thing is confusing. So it's supposedly the four highest ranked conference champions get byes, or they get in.
So that's my point. Is Arizona State? Let's say they win, they are a higher rank than Clemson is right now. So them, Boise State, let's say Oregon, let's say Texas, those would get the bye. So can Clemson still make the top 12? Because that's where it ends up being, is they have to make it in the top 12, don't they?
Nope. As long as they win the ACC championship game, they're in, period.
Okay.
So that's where, and they get the bye. So, well, if Arizona State wins, they would wind up with the bye because they are the higher rank. Clemson would be the 12 seed, and then I think SMU would wind up the 11 seed.
So then Alabama could get kicked out.
Yes. Alabama gets kicked out if Clemson beats SMU, and the committee uses their brain and puts SMU in over Alabama.
Yeah, so Alabama is rooting for SMU to win because if Clemson wins, they get that guarantee into the top 12, and SMU, I think, still belongs to be there. But that's where we'll see where their bias lies. But speaking of bias...
Well, hang on. Mm-hmm. If Georgia loses their championship game against Texas, that's a third loss for them.
Yeah.
That becomes a different conversation, and it gets real murky.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how seeding will work based upon who the second round would be against.
Mm-hmm.
So I certainly wouldn't want to see, say, Georgia in Texas's corner of the bracket if Texas beats Georgia in the SEC championship game,
Yeah.
because that would be 3 times in 2 months that those two teams would have played.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because right now you look at the bracket that Oregon would be in if things stayed the same, they would have to face off against the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. That is by no means easy at all. And in fact, that might be one of the toughest ones to go against. But some of these seedings can change it with some losses. So we'll see how that plays, because this conference championship is this weekend is big on how that's going to play. But I talked. Oh, David?
No, you can finish your thoughts.
Well, I was going to go on to the whole bias thing if you wanted to get in a comment before that.
Well, I was just going to say, like, are Oregon fans really that nervous about facing off against either Ohio State or Tennessee? Because with Ohio State, you have an offense that has never really reached its full potential, and they also, lost to an average Michigan team. And then Tennessee has no offense other than Dylan Sampson. So is it just, I guess Tennessee and Ohio State are overall bigger brands than Oregon. I feel like that's the only reason, or the main reason, why you guys would be scared to face them. But I don't think you should be.
Well, I mean, one of our closest wins this year was against Boise State. I know Ashton Genty's out of this world, but that run type of game did affect us, and who knows, that could happen with Dylan Sampson in Tennessee. In Ohio State, I think Ohio State speaks for itself. The one thing that they got away from that they started out great with was throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith. I mean, the guy was taking over the country the first 6-7 weeks of the season. And yeah, he's still been doing good, but not as much feeding to him as they once were. So I think if they were to get him in, that guy could go against any defensive back, I feel like, in the country. So that's something to keep an eye out on. I mean, if you're in the playoff, I'm going to be nervous no matter who we're playing, because you're in the playoff. You got there for a reason, unless your name's Alabama. So, but that is a team that come in the playoffs. If they do get a win, I'd be scared to play against them. So,
All right.
yeah. But we talk about how it seems like there's always been a SEC type of bias. I know I mentioned it with Alabama here, but is there possibly a Big Ten brand bias right now in the committee? Because Ohio State lost against a Michigan team that really had no business winning that game, but it is a rivalry game, and sometimes you never know what you're going to grab out of the hat. And Michigan did pull off the win in the shoe, yet Ohio State only dropped 4 spots. But if you saw earlier in the year, there was much greater drops when Georgia lost to Ole Miss, dropped 9 spots from 3 to 12. Alabama lost to Vandy, dropped 6 spots from 1 to 7. Alabama also lost to Tennessee and dropped another 8 spots from 7 to 15. And then Penn State lost to Ohio State, only dropped 3 spots from 3 to 6. You're starting to see kind of a pattern there that, well, maybe they're looking more at favoring the Big Ten in this. As you can tell, the Big Ten is well represented right now in the top 12. So is there some type of bias going on, David?
Well, you know what you noticed, Matthew? When Ohio State only dropped a few points, you noticed something? I mentioned his name earlier. The athletic director of Michigan, Ward Manuel, is on the playoff committee, and he's trying to make Michigan look good, look better than its record indicates. So, what do you think of that, Ed?
I think there might not be as big a bias for Ohio State. I mean, big a bias for the Big Ten. It's a bias for Ohio State. That one school in and of itself. If you lose to them, you're still just as good. If they lose, they're still just as good. Ohio State was number 1 going into Autzen Stadium, and they only dropped to number 2. So continue to look at who it is that we're talking about. Ohio State is like the one beacon of hope for the Big Ten to be just as good, if not better, than the SEC. And the committee, a bunch of old Midwestern people that don't really watch football and long for the glory days of Woody Hayes, they're they're leaning on Ohio State. So everything having to do with that program is great. Anything else around it that happens, well, we have to judge them more fairly. So we don't look like we're giving bias to the SEC. Well, guess what? The SEC had a much bigger, much tougher time with cannibalizing itself this year than the Big Ten did, because there are two fewer teams in that league. So there's less of a chance of all the good teams playing each other. So here we are. Ohio State, after 2 losses, have gone from number 1 to number 6? That's unheard of, especially when you see Georgia loses to a team that is just barely out of the playoffs and drops 9 spots after 1 loss. So that's ridiculous in my book, but it is what it is until we get a reformatting, which I'm sure is going to come in the offseason. I'm personally okay with using the BCS to pick 12 teams and then go from there. But with the way that the rules are now, it is so subjective, and this committee seems to be subjective to think that Ohio State is a better program or a more well-respected program than anybody else that is playing football now.
David, the first year of the college football playoff in its existence, Ohio State came in at the 4th seed. Mm-hmm. And there was drama around that because some felt that with the injuries they had, they didn't really belong there at that 4th seed. And yet they still participated in it. They won the whole thing. And I think that ever since then, the committee has held on to that, thinking, well, they did it then, let's continue to keep giving them that chance, that shot. And
And don't forget, Matthew, not just the injuries, but people were also mad because that was the same Ohio State team who in the beginning of the season got clobbered by an average Virginia Tech team. Mm-hmm. And so people were wondering, hey, what the hell? Yeah. But of course, what helped Ohio State was the same thing that hurt TCU, and that Ohio State played in its conference championship game and destroyed its opponent, whereas the Big 12 at that time didn't have a conference championship. Obviously, that wasn't fair to TCU because you can't control if you're in a conference championship game or not. And Ed, I'll give you the floor. I can tell you want to say something.
I'm just trying to clarify. Are you talking about the year that TCU went and they were part of the Mountain West?
TCU was in the Big 12 in 2014. That might have been their first or second year. But I think TCU moved away from the Mountain West after that. Or, during that time.
I got you.
Yeah. It's just that there was drama leading up to it. Ohio State was given the chance, and they end up winning the whole thing with their 3rd-string quarterback beating Oregon Ducks in the championship game. So, but since then, Ohio State is been given the benefit of the doubt, and now we're looking at it once again that if you lost to them, you don't lose much. If they lost, you definitely don't lose much.
You know what? You know what else it was? Just last thing, Ed. It also helped that Ohio State had Urban Meyer, and I'm not just talking about because Urban Meyer was a great college football coach. It helped that they had Urban Meyer because that he basically told the committee, "Hey, you better let us in."
Sounds like every Ohio State fan.
I mean, Urban Meyer seems to be the John Gotti of college football.
Yeah. Just not in Jacksonville.
Right?
Yeah.
But one point I want to make very clear is we still have these championship games to play. Mm-hmm. So the seeding of where these teams wind up after this round of ranking is going to fluctuate quite a bit. We could go anywhere from Georgia being the 5th seed and having a home game to being on the road and playing at Ohio State.
Yeah.
You know, you could have Ohio State lose to Penn State in that championship game and see them go on the road to Texas, which we're slated to play them next year anyway. So that it's all mumbled, it's all jumbled until we get through these games, which I'm looking forward to these matchups.
Yeah, and the teams that aren't in a conference championship game, such as Notre Dame, please join a conference already. Ohio State, Tennessee, Indiana.
ACC.
Yeah, that's 4 teams that aren't in a conference championship game, but we know they're safe. They will be in the playoff. There's just no changing there. But yes, the seedings will change.
Yeah, Notre Dame's already in the ACC for basketball. So
Nice.
why not join football?
And everything else.
And yeah, just join already. Yeah, but well, speaking of the conference championship games, I want to preview a couple of these here because these are some big time prime time matchups, and it doesn't get better than Georgia and Texas. This is a rematch. Although Texas is the higher seed, this is clearly a home game for Georgia as it is taking place in Atlanta. Go figure. Sorry, Ed, get used to the SEC because it's always going to be like that no matter what.
Right.
But Texas did play, a home game against Georgia this year. It didn't go so well for Texas as it was their only loss. Maybe they do need a change of scenery here to maybe beat Georgia, beat them on their home turf. I know it's not their home field in Rome, but it is a home game for Georgia. And there's no better feeling than beating them in their home state. So Texas, they're pissed off. They want that redemption, and this is the place to do it. Is right here, right now. Ed, I want to have you preview a little bit of this and maybe a little bit of the drama surrounding the mascot.
Well, 2 points I want to bring up with Texas. One, getting the number 1 ranking in the country has been a death nail to the next game after that takes place. It happened here with Georgia, and it happened in 2008 against Texas Tech. The whole Michael Crabtree game. Mm-hmm. That was the week 1 of us being ranked number 1 in the country that year. So I'll take it with a grain of salt. But 2, the second point is when we had the home and home with Alabama, we lost at home in a close game, and then we went on the road to Alabama and beat them in their house. This is very reminiscent of that situation, only it's happening in the same season rather than over 2. So there's that part. The last time Texas played Georgia in a bowl game, there was the infamous Bevo attacking Uga incident. And apparently the handlers at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta have decided to not allow Bevo into the stadium to watch his horns play, which I think there's a little more bias in doing that than just space to be allocated for that.
So I just have to say something, and Ed, you're going to hate this, but I actually kind of agree with that. And I hate Georgia, so I'm not being biased here at all. But the reason why I agree with that, Ed, is that at the end of the day, that's still somebody's pet dog, and you can't risk that when you have a big animal there.
Hey, that's somebody's pet bull, okay? You mess with the bull, you get the horns, all right?
That's right.
But the thing about college football, you hear this word everywhere you go, and that is tradition. And it is a tradition to have him there. And it does kind of suck that in their biggest game right now this year.
Maybe I should rephrase. Maybe have, and I always keep forgetting, Ed, how do you pronounce the name? And you literally just
Bevo.
Thank you. Maybe I should rephrase it like this. Bevo should be allowed, but maybe you shouldn't have Bevo and Uga in the same area together.
Yeah.
Well, that would be on Georgia's handlers.
Yeah. Yeah, don't get them confused with Devo. That's an '80s band. Bevo with a B.
We're gonna whip it. Whip
Yeah,
it good.
but no, besides that, in all seriousness, this is going to be a close game. These are the two best in the SEC for a reason here, and this was the rematch that not only they wanted, but the country wanted here. So
Mhm.
I'm all for that. It is finally happening here. Texas is the favorites, as they should be, and I respect that. And what I'm curious to, Ed, is what are we going to see with Arch Manning in this game?
I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw with Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see a lot of QB runs, but it's going to be in a package. It's not going to be 100% Arch Manning's game. So when Texas gets inside the 10-yard line, you're probably going to see Arch Manning in there. One of the big things that we did not see in that game on October 19th was Texas had not cleared up who their starting running back was, who was their bell cow. Now we have him. Quintravian Wisner, he is our bell cow right now. Jaden Blue, he's a great change of pace back. He's not a bell cow. So, and we proved that last week against Texas A&M, that when we give Wisner the ball and let the offensive line do their job, everything else becomes easier for Quinn. And Quinn Ewers, the biggest knock I have on him right now, and I've talked about his mechanics a lot, but what I'm seeing a lot from him now, and I think it might have to do with the oblique injury that he suffered earlier this season, is the lollipop throws in the middle of the field. Those are throws that a Georgia defense is going to feast on. So if we can avoid that, get him to drive the ball into the spaces where it needs to go, then I think we're in better shape than we were from when Quinn was coming off of that injury. The biggest thing about that game last time is it was a bad half that wound up turning into a bad game. So Texas fought back. They outscored Georgia in the second half of that game, but Georgia never was able to sustain drives in that game against the Texas defense, partly because they didn't have to go very far to score after the 2 turnovers. So those were a big part of it. We eliminate the turnovers, force Georgia to go down the field, and it is going to be hell on earth for Carson Beck to play against that secondary and with that front seven coming after him, trying to go 80 yards down the field. I don't think that they can do it, and that's why even being a homer, I think objectively Texas should be the favorite in this game, and they will take this.
So what's your prediction, Ed?
My prediction is this is going to be a somewhat grimy game, and I think it's going to come down to like a 23-19 type of score.
David.
So, I think Texas is favored for a reason, and they've got everything going. Texas is the hottest team in the country, not named Oregon. They have the best defense in the country, and they also have the revenge factor. They're going to be motivated to avenge their one loss. The problem with that, however, is that for the past 4 years or so, coaches don't really get revenge on Kirby Smart. I mean, the only active coach that's gotten revenge on Kirby Smart is Lane Kiffin. But other than him, I mean, Josh Heupel has not gotten revenge on Kirby Smart. Neither has Brent Key. Coaches, they just, Kirby Smart gets the best of these head coaches. And for the most part, nobody can really get the best of him for the most part.
So you think? What are you predicting though in this game? Do you think Texas is able to finally get that rematch type of win?
No, I'm still taking Texas in the win, and I think Texas is gonna beat Georgia fairly soundly. I'm gonna say 24-10.
On paper, and I think Texas should. I think Texas should beat the brakes off of Georgia. There is a reason Texas is favored, but there's one thing that is just looming over me in this game, and that is last year's SEC title game where Georgia lost to Alabama. Georgia lost their season because of that loss. They know that they lose this game, there's a chance they lose that again. And I just don't see Kirby Smart allowing that to happen. I get he's a coach and not a player. His players do have to perform, but this is a do or die moment for Georgia. Whereas Texas, I think they can afford with a loss to still be in the playoff. Georgia, on the other hand, I don't believe so. So there's more of an asterisk to that. So I'm going to take Georgia here only because I think that this is a do or die more for them, that they have to win this game to continue their season. And with Kirby Smart at the helm, I think he'll be able to instill that into his players. I know that they will not have the same talent they had last year with Ladd McConkey and, of course, Brock Bowers, but I just feel like this is a game that they know they have to win, and I think they do pull off the win.
I understand that argument, but Kirby can motivate his players all he wants. But if Georgia does lose, you can't be surprised by it because this is the same Georgia team that got killed by an Ole Miss team who, in my opinion, is not nearly as good as their record indicates. They played a bunch of dog shit teams. Their defense has been nowhere near as good as it has been in years past. Per Georgia standards, This is a very average Georgia team, and you can't always just rely on the fact that, oh, well, they're Georgian, so they should get together. Would I be surprised if Georgia won? No, obviously not. But as I said, per Georgia standards, they have been a very average team. So no one can be surprised at all if Georgia does lose tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep. But best of luck, of course, Ed, to your team. And now we start talking about my team as my Oregon Ducks go on to face off against Penn State for the Big Ten championship game. It was almost all certain that it was going to be a rematch against Ohio State, similar to the Texas and Georgia game. It did not work out that way as Ohio State lost to Michigan, but Penn State is still a good team. They are 11-1. Their one loss being against that Ohio State team. The one thing that Penn State has, I think, really they have a couple good things going for them, but one thing in this game is they have one of the best run-stop teams in the country, as they only average giving up, I want to say, about 2 yards a carry. Oregon likes to run the ball, as they have a two-headed tandem with Noah Whittington and Jordan James. Surprisingly enough, PFF, if you really like following PFF scores, they got Jordan James as the number 2 ranked PFF back in all of college football, behind Ashton Jeanty, of course. But Jordan, I like the 2 running backs that we have because they complement each other in their styles, which is awesome. But Penn State is great at stuffing the run. But here's the thing that they don't have going for them as much is they can stop the run, but can they stop the passing game? And now that Oregon's got Tez Johnson back, hopefully fully healthy, having him and Evan Stewart, Ferguson at tight end, I think it's going to be very tough to have to cover that many type of receivers. I just feel like Oregon's going to overwhelm Penn State. The other good thing that I think Penn State has on their side is Tyler Warren at the tight end position, as he is one of the very best tight ends in the whole country. Oregon struggled against Colson Loveland of Michigan and several other tight ends in the country, but that's just one player. I don't see Penn State having a dominant performance on offense, but they will on those categories of possibly stuffing the run on defense, and Tyler Warren probably having a great game, maybe 100 yards receiving. But I just really feel like Oregon's going to win this game. They are the number 1 team in the country, and I know it's kind of like a road game for them going all the way to Indy, but I think that they will do great. Their last meeting they faced off was in 1995 Rose Bowl. Penn State won that game, but I think Oregon's just way too talented. And the one thing that is just crazy to me is this matchup predictor on ESPN that has Penn State at 53% to win this game. David, your thoughts on hearing that?
I think that's insane. I think Oregon is going to kill Penn State, and I don't think it's going to be close. I think Penn State is the most fraudulent team in the projected playoffs right now. And the reason why I say that is, listen, Penn State has some studs, okay? You talk about Tyler Warren. I think he is arguably the best tight end in the country. And they have a monster at defensive end in Abdul Carter, who's just an absolute game wrecker, okay? But here are the two things that hold Penn State back: coaching and quarterback play, all right? Drew Aller has not really shown us that he can be the difference maker at quarterback. And I have the evidence for that for this year. Against the only ranked teams that Penn State has played, Drew Aller did not score any touchdowns at all. And then when it comes to James Franklin, James Franklin is who he is, okay? He is a guy who relies on the talent of his roster to beat up on inferior opponents, but folds when he faces against teams that are just as talented or more talented. So I don't think this game is going to be close. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that out of all the Power Four conference championships, I think the Big Ten championship game is going to be by far the worst one, because I think Oregon is just going to blow the doors off of Penn State.
I sure hope you're right, David. Ed.
I'm very much in the same camp, more so because of James Franklin. James Franklin, if I were to coin a nickname on him, it's probably Butt Pucker. Because that's what happens when he plays against a good opponent that he needs to get over the hump on. It's just for the many years that he went against Michigan and Ohio State, Penn State was always the third team in that division. Well, why were they the third team in that division? It's because James Franklin always called the game to not lose instead of to go win the game. Well, you can't win the game by not losing the game. So that it's just the way that he's built as a Big Ten coach. I don't think he was as much like that when he was coaching Vanderbilt. I'm having a hard time remembering that, but since he's been in the Big Ten, that's just his MO and that's his program ever since he got there. So Oregon is going to myrtleize these guys, and I'm gonna have to put it at the score that Penn State won the 95 Rose Bowl game on, 38-20. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen in this game.
The best, in my opinion, the best team that James Franklin ever had was, I think it was that 2016 team when they had Saquon Barkley. He was in his junior season. In my opinion, that was the best.
John Clifford.
Yep. That was the best team that Franklin ever had, and he couldn't win with those guys. I guess I got to give a score prediction as well. I'm going to say that Oregon beats Penn State 41-17.
I was going to say Trace McSorley. I thought it was Trace McSorley, but no, you were right. Yeah, I mean, I'll give a score prediction. I'll go 42-24 Oregon in this game. So, yeah, I hope we're all right there. On to the ACC. As we talked about and alluded to earlier, SMU in their first year in the ACC is in the championship game as they face off against the Clemson Tigers. Clemson coming off a loss against their rival, South Carolina. This South Carolina team is a better team than a lot of people thought. Clemson, they struggled for the most part against Pitt. They did pull off a great win there. SMU just had a great season. Their only loss against BYU. This is going to be a very fun, interesting game because Clemson, as we talked about, could potentially play spoiler with a win here. I think SMU, no matter win or lose, deserves a spot in the final rankings. But this game itself is going to be very close. If you are looking at even the betting odds as of right now, a 2-point spread, that's right on par as to where I see this game going, because I do believe it'll be that close. The teams love to run that with the clock and everything. You're going to have to be smart on clock management in this type of game if you want any chance. But don't blink. This game could be very quick with the amount of runs. But this Clemson and Dabo Swinney team, I never know what they're really going to do nowadays. We know they aren't going to attack the transfer portal, but as far as these games go, they are hit or miss, and Cade Klubnik is one of those. I know he only has about 5 interceptions or so on the year, but is he going to have that high caliber type of game? You just don't know. But Ed, you agree with me that this is going to be a very close game, like a possible field goal type could win this game?
Oh yeah, for sure. The biggest thing I'm sitting here thinking about this game that crosses my mind is, along with the transfer portal, I think there's another thing that Dabo Swinney has not really figured out about college football in the year 2024, and that is the clock rules. The clock rules have really taken away probably 25% of the extra plays that those teams that he took to the national championship game, those extra plays that those teams were able to just murder people with. And with the way the clock rules are sitting now, games are much closer. They're much tighter. You have to be on point with how you are managing it throughout the game and not just in the final 5 minutes of each half. So that's another point about Dabo Swinney, but that's also kind of hamstrung Cade Klubnik with the way that he's being called through the games. So quite honestly, I think SMU has a better shot at winning this, even though this is somewhat of a home game for Clemson, being played in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So that is a factor in this. But the way that SMU attacks going downhill against their opponents, and I got to go with the Pony Express on this, and it is going to be that close. It's probably going to be a 34-31 type game.
Well, all that being said about Dabo's clock management, still better at it than Matt Eberflus, I can say.
That is very true.
But doesn't it kind of feel like Clemson is sort of making a little comeback story? Because I remember all the talks about how Dabo Swinney was washed. He was a guy that got carried by 2 generational quarterbacks, and Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. And yet here Clemson is in the ACC championship game. And if Clemson beats SMU, they get in the playoffs. Is it safe to say that Clemson is back?
No.
I don't ever want to hear that phrase ever again.
Yeah, I'm sure, Ed.
Hey, listen, they won a couple of titles recently, okay? So they've shown us what they can be capable of when they have a generational quarterback.
And how dare you not say Taj Boyd?
Yeah.
I forgot about
yeah,
him.
How dare you?
Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you mentioned it, Ed, but I don't know if you mentioned this specific part, but Clemson's recruiting is 30th, maybe 29th, 28th. So maybe Dabo should attack the portal more. But
he's set in his ways.
But no, back to the game. I'm very excited about this matchup. The one conference championship that I'm looking forward to the most is the Big 12 title game, but I think this is going to be the second most exciting conference championship, especially when you consider where the teams are at. You have SMU playing in a power conference for the first time ever, and you have Clemson, who, as I said, I believe is sort of making a bit of a comeback story. And so, I think at the end of the day, I think whatever happens, either team is going to be happy, or maybe not happy if you lose. But whichever team loses, I don't think should be too disappointed. Because again, I don't think anybody expected SMU to get this far. And then with all the talks about how Clemson was falling apart the last couple of years, I think they got to be pretty satisfied with where they're at. But I think this is going to be a close game. I agree with you guys, but I'm going to take SMU. They've been more consistent than Clemson. I'm going to take SMU. I'm going to say 38-37. I think it's going to be a super close game.
Yeah, I agree that it's going to be a close game.
And it's absolutely the most influential game as far as playoff rankings go.
And that's my point is Clemson, I feel like, has no business really being in the college football playoff, but they're going to be in the college football playoff, as I think that they will pull off this victory. I think it's going to be a very defensive type of game. I think it's going to be 20-17 here. Clemson's going to pull it off. They're going to enter the playoffs somehow, some way. They wiggled their way in, but SMU, they deserve to be in the playoff, and I think that they'll stay in the playoff even with the loss here.
If Clemson does make it, okay, I don't say whatever you want about Dabo Swinney, okay, I don't care. But if Clemson does make it, I feel like he is owed some apologies, all right? Because there were a lot of people, including all of us probably, who thought the game had passed, Dabo. So if he makes it, I think he deserves some credit, in my opinion.
Yeah, credit should always be due. Sorry, I got a little guest appearance by the dog here. Yeah, well, David, you mentioned it, so I think it's only right that we briefly just preview it. But that is the Big 12 championship game with Arizona State and Iowa State. Arizona State first year in the conference. Look at that. They're in the Big 12 championship game. So if we want to give some quick predictions here and a brief preview, by all means. I know, David, since you were looking forward to it, I'll let you kind of start with it.
So I'll just make it very quick. One, kudos to Kenny Dillingham and company. Man, I mean, Arizona State was projected to be the worst team in the Big 12. They were 3-9 last year, and they end up this season 10-2. So just a fantastic job that he's done at his alma mater. Kudos to Matt Campbell and Iowa State as well. They weren't as big of a surprising story as Arizona State was, but they were still somewhat surprising in that nobody expected them to make it this far. And so I think both teams are fairly evenly matched as far as the talent, as far as the roster goes. But I think all the momentum is on Arizona State's side right now. And well, it's funny because a few seconds ago I literally said that I think the Big 12 championship game is going to be the most exciting, implying that it's going to be a close game. Yeah. So I'm going to say that Arizona State beats Iowa State 31-24, but it's going to be a game that won't be as close as the 31-24 score indicates. I think that'll be a game that Arizona State is in complete control of from start to finish. So it'll be a close game, but it'll be a game where you can tell that was clearly a Arizona State win.
Yeah. Ed?
Shout out to the next generation of Toby Gerhart. His name is just so fun to play.
Yeah.
So fun to say. But I've always been a big fan of Iowa State's defensive philosophy. That hybrid 3-4 defense that they run there, I think could cause some fits and create some turnovers, especially for teams that have not seen it yet. And I think this is going to be the long way around Iowa State getting in. It's going to be a close matchup. They're going to make it dingy and dirty. So we'll probably see this probably in the lowest scoring game of the weekend. And I think this is going to wind up being probably a 16-13 game.
Yeah, I see a lot of field goals taking place in this game. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be some padded offensive stats. I do think Cam Skattebo, that's going to be the name that you're going to hear the entire game. I think he will put up a lot of yards. Thing is that if it becomes a goal line type of situation, they love to feed him the ball, so he could easily get scores there. But if they're at the 20-yard line within the red zone and they're struggling. It's going to be that field goal type of game. So I'm with you, Ed, that I'm going to go maybe 20-13 here. And I'm going to go with Arizona State. But they do have a lot of momentum, just like David said.
I'll add just one more thing. I think every Florida fan is rooting for Arizona State here because, as my guy Shelton would say, Arizona State has kind of become our farm team lately. So we want to see how good they look.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. So that's about it on college football. I want to start talking about a little bit of baseball here. I know the season's over with, but these winter meetings, they are heating up. No pun intended there. It's getting hot because free agent signings are happening, and there's one name that's synonymous with most of them, and that is the Los Angeles Dodgers, the defending World Series champions. As they started off the free agency with a big hit, signing Blake Snell to a 6 or 5 year deal for $182 million. And Ed, this essentially kind of creates a 6-man rotation for the Dodgers, just like your Dallas Stars with having an extra line. You know, we got an extra man rotation here for the Dodgers.
Which, considering the way that Dave Roberts manages his team, they should have like a 20-man bullpen instead of a 6-man rotation.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. But that bullpen, those games really helped them win that World Series, go on that run this last year. So, yeah, but Blake Snell, he wanted to go where maybe he could win that championship, and he may not be the only player. It seems like the Dodgers, they attract others. But it was a 5-year, $182 million deal, $52 million up front on a signing bonus, $66 million deferred through 2046. We all know the Bobby Bonilla deal and the deferral payments. It's become a national holiday every time it comes around and he gets paid that $1 million. But here's the crazy thing. The Dodgers now have over $1 billion, like Dr. Evil said, $1 billion in deferred salaries on their roster. And, well, this is where my cold take comes into place here because I've been wanting to talk about this for some time, and that was ever since the Shohei Ohtani signing. What the Dodgers did here was something very special. Yes, I alluded to the Bobby Bonilla deferral payments. This isn't something that's new, but it's something that might have been forgot about, which is funny since we talk about every year the Bobby Bonilla deferral payment date. Patrick Mahomes, with his new contract in the NFL, has some deferral in it too. It's something that has been around, but not really played around with. So last year when Shohei Ohtani was looking around for teams, we knew he was going to get a massive, lucrative deal, but who was it going to be with? Ultimately, it ended up coming with the Los Angeles Dodgers, but the genius way that they sold him was on the deferral payments. Shohei Ohtani is the biggest thing in America, since Donald Trump. He is, and it's not even just America, it's in the world. He is an icon. And the fact that they know that and he knows that, he's getting endorsement deals, sponsorships that all but pretty much make up of his salary in general. He could take a $0 payday from the Dodgers and still make up for it with his contracts, with his sponsors and endorsements. So by doing so, they defer that payment down the road. And also on top of that, because teams like the San Francisco Giants, which are my pro team, really wanted Shohei Ohtani. The one thing that has really been a detriment for the Giants, for a lot of the star players, is taxes. California is known to have very high taxes, but so do the city of San Francisco. So how do the Dodgers outsmart that? Let's defer your payments. No taxes are due up front. It'll be due once that payment is due based on where you live at the time. He could change his residency and claim taxes that way. He will be able to escape the whole state of California on their taxes, which first of all is genius. But second of all, this helps the Dodgers escape the luxury tax penalty. That is one thing in the MLB that's different than other leagues is they don't have a cap salary, but they do have the luxury tax, which the Dodgers now with the signings that they've done and the deferrals are now escaping that luxury tax because Tommy Edman is now have deferral, Blake Snell. They have 6 players with a deferred contract. The Dodgers are not only geniuses, they are madmen wanting to continually to win and win and win. And this very well may be what happens for years to come, but they open up that door, guys. They open up that door for other teams to do it as well. And I'm already hearing in the Juan Soto rumors that other teams in the major leagues are now considering deferral payments. So, David, I am interested to hear your thoughts on this. Is this a door the Dodgers open that we are now going to hear from time to come?
Yeah, I think it has to be, in my opinion. And then also, I can't help but find it funny that Blake Snell is signing with the same team that Rays manager Kevin Cash kind of screwed him over against in the World Series. Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just as far as as far as your question goes, Matthew, I don't know if this is the kind of answer you're looking for, but it does sort of, I feel like, opens up the door for rich teams to win it all again. And when I say that, I'm not saying that rich teams have never won it. Like obviously, the Red Sox are usually in the top 10, top 5 for payroll, I think, and other teams as well. But of course, with the Dodgers, the whole thing about them before they won this year was, well, they can spend all the money that they want, but they can't buy a championship. People would say the same thing about the Yankees, right? Well, here you have the Dodgers who essentially did buy a championship, okay? That Dodgers fans who listen to the show, that's no knock on you, okay? If my team did that and they won the World Series, I would be ecstatic. I would not be like, well, you spend too much money, so I'm not going to celebrate. No, you should be happy. But that's just a fact of the matter, okay? You bought your way to a championship. There's no shame in that whatsoever. So it does kind of feel like the Dodgers winning it sort of opened up the door to that, if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. I just think that it becomes a new negotiation tactic for all these teams, especially in this Juan Soto approach, because uh,
Mm,
this is going to be the biggest contract that we've ever seen in all of sports, and it surely deferral payment will be a top.
okay. So in fairness, I may have misunderstood what you were saying then, but
It's okay.
it's kind of a it's a different sport, but that's also the same reason why players like to sign with the Tampa Bay Lightning of the National Hockey League, because we don't have any state income tax here, and people really like that a lot. Players want to go to cities, to states where they won't get taxed a lot, or where they can find loopholes the way that the Dodgers did.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed. I've been talking too much.
Oh, no, you're right on cue. And what I gather out of this is, will this type of negotiating tactic be something that maybe some of your smaller market teams could use for taking a shot at a couple of championships? I I look squarely at the Pittsburgh Pirates and think, can you imagine if they were smart enough to do this with all the young talent that they've had come through that organization? I I mean, Garrett Cole, you got Paul Skeens now. I mean, imagine if they had been smart enough to do that instead of trying to penny pinch and just you know take only the TV revenue and use that for your roster. I will give the Dodgers credit. They are all in. They are 100% all in and then some.
Mhm.
But what I don't particularly care for is, if your roster is essentially the all-star team, then why does anybody want to watch baseball? I, it becomes a second. You have the same argument that we've been having about college football. Of there's 4 or 5 teams that are certainly worth watching, and every other team is trying to get to that level. So that becomes a detriment to the sport, and so much so that to try and gain interest, Rob Manfred put out the dumbest idea that I've ever seen for trying to spice up Major League Baseball this week in the Golden at Bat idea, which is that's something for Banana Ball. That's not something for Major League Baseball.
Wait, what's the Golden Bat thing?
Oh, David hasn't heard of it. Oh my gosh!
I've heard the phrase.
The Golden at Bat. The Golden at Bat is in the final inning. A manager can take any player on his roster and put them at bat for whatever situation they're in. So, say for instance, my Astros. You've got 2 on, you're down by 3, and it's 2 outs. And the 8-hole hitter is expected to be up. So, Golden at Bat. Oh, no. I don't want my light hitting catcher to be up to bat. No, I want Yordan Alvarez, who is supposed to be hitting in the 2-hole, to go ahead and bat for me at that time.
Wow, think about what kind of message that's
to your.
Hey, this was my chance to shine, and my coach is taking that away from me. What the hell, man?
Yeah, that's one of the things about baseball that is paramount is anybody can be the hero.
Yeah,
anybody, and it's when it's your turn, you go up there and you do it.
I'll never forget 2011. You know, the Rays. We were, I think, 9-10 games back of the wild card, and we clinched the wild card. Back then, I think it was just one wild card for each league. We clinched the wild card spot last game of the season, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Dan Johnson, but there was a player on the Rays who hit a home run. We were down to our final strike, and he essentially became the hero. And, you know, before that, it would have been like, who the hell is Dan Johnson? Well, Dan Johnson was the guy who saved our season, all right? So I think you're spot on.
The same thing happened with Brad Ausmus for us.
I'll one up you, David, in that same year, 2011. Who the hell was David Freese? Oh, yeah, he became a hero for St. Louis.
So I have a story about David Freese that I read that like apparently this dude might be the most humble dude of all time, because didn't he actually reject an entry into the Cardinals Hall of Fame, basically saying, yeah, I don't think I'm good enough. You know, I had a fun little run in 2011, but I don't think I'm good enough to make the Cardinals Hall of Fame. So no, thank you. Like, is that not the most humble guy or what?
I don't know. I mean, he had those hero moments, and then his career pretty much went down from there. But yeah, you never know who could be that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much the moral of it. But yeah, this Golden at Bat thing should quickly be shot down and never be talked about ever again.
Yeah.
But we mentioned his name really quick. I just want to bring up Juan Soto with the free agent landing spots, because it's expected to happen any day now. The numbers right now that are being talked about, 15-year, $700 million range. I mean, this is a lifetime contract. He'll be there the rest of his career. These are insane numbers. Baseball, it's taken things to new limits, new heights. I remember when Giancarlo Stanton signed his 10-year, $300 million deal. I thought that was the biggest thing I'd ever see. And then now that number keeps going higher and higher and higher. But the top contenders right now, it seems like it's narrowing down to the Red Sox, Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, and Blue Jays. I saw earlier Steve Cohen said that they will top any offer that's out there. Money will not be the reason they do not get Juan Soto. So these teams want him. if he ends up with the Dodgers, I'm completely done with baseball. I mean, I can't do it anymore because how their name is still in this conversation with who they already have is beyond me. But the Dodgers want to win. That's their MO is we'll do whatever it takes. We'll sign whoever is out there to win. But I don't really know. I haven't really heard who maybe is leading the charge on who's going to get him, but I know that all teams are pretty aggressive. The Dodgers aren't as aggressive. They're kind of laying back, but they may swoop in. It's the Dodgers.
As a fit, the word around Major League Baseball is as a fit, he should go to the Red Sox.
Yeah.
Which the Red Sox just picked up Aroldis Chapman too.
Yeah.
So that's, that would be an interesting thing, to try and up the rivalry again between them and the Yankees.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter really where he goes to the Mets, it's still the Yankees. It's a Subway Series. He goes to the Red Sox. Even the Blue Jays are still in the same division. So all those teams are on the East except for the Dodgers. So we'll see where he signs, but it's guaranteed it'll be the biggest contract in Major League Baseball.
You want to talk about deferring payment to get around taxes? Let him go to Toronto.
I know. That'll be fun. Yeah, so we're gonna see. It's gonna happen any day now. It'll be breaking news on all of our phones, and we'll be sure to cover it. But that's about all we have today, folks. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We've got some exciting games happening Conference Championship weekend, so be sure to watch those games and hit those like and subscribe buttons. Let us know your thoughts and opinions, how you are feeling about us here on this show. Don't forget to tune in on Monday as we talk about these games that just took place and where we are, because where the college football rankings are going to be too, because those will come out. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.